Hello guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in this video I'm going to be showing you a pretty cool concept for a build that will only work in the future. Currently this build does not work right now, and the reason for that is because it focuses around glaive melees and their interactions with exotic gauntlets that focus on melees in the future. So currently, obviously, glaive melees don't work with anything, right? Literally nothing. Except from a couple glaive perks like Grave Robber and Swash. But the actual melee itself does not benefit from the damage increasing perks that it works with. And it doesn't work with any exotics or anything, right? It doesn't work with anything. But in the future, Bungie have stated that they will make glaive melees work with uncharged melee-based exotics. So that is Karnstein Armlets, Winter's Guile, Wormgod Caress, Synthoceps, you know, exotics like that. And because of that, I have decided that I would make a build now that focuses on Solar 3.0 as well, since it's, you know, the thing. And I would try and mimic a infinite health, invulnerability, invincible style build, kind of like the Lorelei Titan build. And we're going to be using Karnstein Armlets for that. And currently, I'm just using Edge of Intent because I don't have a good Lubrae's Ruin. I can't craft it or anything. But technically, the element of the glaive doesn't actually matter because we're not using anything that's going to be like, you need to use solar for this. Okay, we're not using anything like that. Purely for the intent that you can use whatever glaive you want, since the exotic glaives by themselves aren't very good. But if you have like a really good Nezarec Whisper that you've crafted and you really love, then you can use that as well. Also, I'm not speccing into solar so heavily as well, even on the solar subclass itself, because there is a chance that by the time this change is made, Arc 3.0 is already out. Arc 3.0 is arguably better for the build. It could be so far down the line that we're almost at Lightfall by the time this change is made. I have no idea. It could happen this season with the mid-season sandbox changes that are coming up. I have no idea. So I've tried not to spec too heavily into that. I've also tried to avoid artifact mods in case that this becomes relevant later, after the season is gone. However, I will be using Classy Restoration because if it does happen this season, that is going to be incredibly useful for staying alive as long as possible. So, again, the glaive I've chosen is the Edge of Intent right now because it has a restorative turret. Basically what you do to activate this is you get the full shield, you get the full energy on the glaive, and then you can consume that shield to create a turret that will heal you continuously. Again, you do have to sacrifice the shield, so, you know, I would recommend using that as a panic option and then having the shield be your main source of staying alive up close and personal, because it stops stomps, it stops any form of knockback. You're completely invulnerable while you're holding that shield, and if you play your cards right, you can keep that shield up almost permanently, which is great. And then again, as mentioned, we're going to be pairing this with Karnsteins because any melee hit, or a kill, sorry, any melee kill, including the glaive down the line, will give you a big bump of health and then give you health regen for a short amount of time. It is the same as Restoration 1, technically. It feels about the same as Restoration 1, which is pretty good. And then paired with everything in the build, that is going to basically keep us unkillable permanently, which is awesome. So, getting into the subclass, a lot of things are different here to the usual builds. We're going to be using Well of Radiance because DPS and the fact that I can stay up closer to enemies and not get instantly killed with the glaive, which is nice. And then we have Healing Rift. I was thinking about using Phoenix Dive because it's an instant cooldown. No, instant cast, sorry, with Classy Restoration. You know, it's just like instantly, boom, done, I've got Classy, rather than going through the full Rift animation, since that can take a while. And it can be cancelled for some reason still. I don't know why they haven't fixed that. But Healing Rift gives you a little bit of overshield as soon as you pop it, which can keep me alive technically for longer than Phoenix Dive would, so I've decided to go for that. But technically you could use whichever one you want, because Classy Restoration will probably keep you alive anyway. Then I have Celestial Fire because it can be used from a long way away. It's got a ton of range, whereas Incinerator Snap doesn't. And personally, I just prefer Celestial Fire because it's a faster cast, it can be used from far away, and it does do everything that Incinerator Snap does anyway, so yeah. Then I have Healing Grenade because, of course, we're not using Loreleis for this. We're not that unkillable, even with Karnsteins, so Healing Grenade is going to give us that extra bit of survivability that we need. This is also going to be really nice for a fragment that I have in here that's based around healing allies as well. So yeah. And then I have Icarus Dash because even though my melee will be kind of nice for this build, we're going to be holding the Glaive most of the time, and the Glaive melee is not going to work with Celestial Fire. Like, I can't Celestial Fire with the Glaive out. So I don't really want to be swapping my Glaive too much. And because of that, I haven't gone for Heat Rises for melees because, I don't know, Heat Rises just doesn't seem worth it. The melee can be nice, and the extra bit of healing can be nice, especially since we are using a healing grenade. But the thing is that I don't want to get booped up into the air and then have to slowly fly down just to glaive something. Being in the air is not very practical for a glaive, so yeah. I have decided to go for Icarus Dash for the movement and the slight bit of cure, and that's it. And then I've gone with Touch of Flame, because with a healing grenade, it'll give you a bigger boost of cure, and it'll give you Restoration 2, the same as Classy Restoration, which is really awesome, and that's pretty much the only reason why I'm using this. Now, for the Fragments, powered melee attacks against combatants make you and nearby allies radiant. Ember or torches. The reason why I'm using this is because radiant will buff the melee on the glaive. It does actually affect the melee on the glaive. We will have to swap out our glaive to use the Celestial Fire every now and then for this. And we don't have anything to actually extend this because it isn't that important. The thing is with this, if I did use Empyrean, I tried Empyrean with this. And you basically just have to get a lot of, like, actual glaive shot kills, which is great. You know, you will be doing a lot of that, but it just wasn't practical, and it wasn't fast enough to keep Radiant and Restoration up as much as possible. It's not like running around with a mini tool with Incandescent, you know. It's just not very good with a glaive. And of course the melee doesn't work because it isn't solar, so that won't work. And yeah, it's just not that great. But I did want to get some form of Radiant in here anyway to buff that melee every now and then. So yeah. And then I have Ember of Singeing, which is your class ability recharges faster when you Scorch targets. Of course, our melee is going to Scorch targets. So that's just kind of like a nice little way of getting classy restoration back on the side. But overall, it probably won't be doing too much anyway. And then I have Ember of Searing, which is defeating those Scorch targets, grants melee energy. So you'll use your melee to get class ability. You will Scorch the targets then with the melee, and then you will kill the targets with whatever else, and that'll give you melee energy back so that you can, you know, go right back into getting Radiant and Scorching those targets and getting your class ability back again. And then finally I have Ember of Benevolence, which is applying Restoration, Cure, or Radiant to allies, increases grenade, melee, and class ability regeneration for myself for a short time. Now, all three of those abilities are quite useful for this build. Radiant being more useful, right, with the melee, which is why I've spec'd into Strength, because I think keeping that Radiant up as much as possible is very nice. But getting class ability and grenade back super fast on top of that is great, and for free. I'm going to be using healing nades, I'm going to be applying Radiant to everyone, and Restoration can be done effectively with other sources as well. So, this is awesome. Alright, and now for the mods. Now, I just want to say before I get into the mods, it was very difficult to build for this, because mods like Melee Wellmaker, for example, don't work with Glaives, because this requires a powered melee, and of course, I'm not using powered melees too much, because I'm using the Glaive, and the Glaive is not a powered melee. So I had to build in just kind of whatever for this to work. It's very scuffed, but the mods are kind of an afterthought for a build like this. The whole thing revolves around killing with the Glaive, keeping uptime on abilities, and then, of course, using the Glaive with Karnsteins, not necessarily using everything for the mods. So let's get into this. Alright, so first off, I'm using Elemental Armaments. On the off chance that I do actually start firing the Glaive, which will happen sometimes, obviously, you still want to shoot the Glaive. So actually shooting the Glaive as well to get my restorative turret will sometimes give me wells in this case, and then with those wells, I'll be activating Well of Life as usual because you want that survivability. On top of this, those shots that I do to get Elemental Armaments will activate Harmonic Siphon. It'll use, it'll make orbs. And then with those orbs, I get recuperation. Just to get this out here, Kinetic Siphon currently does not work with the melee. We have no idea if it will work with the melee down the line, so I haven't put it in the build in case. But if it does work with the melee, then sure, 100% use that so that the melee can make those orbs as well and give you recuperation. Otherwise, this is kind of what we're working with. And then I have Font of Wisdom as well to work with these because Font of Might won't work with other glaives, and Font of Might will only work with this shot from the glaive, which we're not going to be using too much because it doesn't have good DPS. It doesn't really kill things very quickly. But technically you could use that bonus damage to get Elemental Armaments and Harmonic Siphon to work a bit easier. Don't recommend it. I recommend just going for Wisdom to get your well back faster since we're not spec'd into Intellect, and this will put our Intellect to 10, tier 10, so yeah. Then I have Focusing Strike. This does work with the melee on the Glaive because it just requires a melee attack. Surprisingly, this one does work, at least in my experience it worked. Maybe it's bugged, maybe it doesn't work and I'm just seeing things, I'm not sure. But either way, if this doesn't work right now, this will work in the future because it just requires a melee attack, and that's the kind of thing that Bungie are trying to change for Glaives in the future. Kind of like Karnstein's, just melee kills. This is just melee hits, and that will work in the future. Then I have Fastball for easier healing with the healing grenades. Everything else is basically just for survivability and to keep uptime on abilities, with like Kickstart and resistances and stuff. We got Radiant Light for stats. And then finally I have Classy Restoration, as mentioned earlier, for survivability as well, because that's the whole purpose of this build, is to stay alive as much as possible. As for stats, again, 100 Resilience for 40% damage reduction, 100 Recov to keep that class ability up as much as possible, and for Recov rate, the survivability side of things, really. And then Strength for chaining those abilities with the Fragments, and also for Radiant to buff the melee on the Glaive. So yeah, that's the entire build. It's very simple, because nothing works with the Glaive. A lot of things could change down the line. Arc 3.0 might be completely insane, and etc, etc. So I will be covering this probably multiple times and updating it as time goes on, and as changes are made. But currently, this build does not work. It is a concept. If you want to copy the build and get it ready for when these changes do take place, go ahead. I will be making a video stating that the changes have been made, and then obviously showing a updated build, or showing this build once again, just briefly to show you how it works. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you enjoy this build, and hopefully this does come into effect soon, so we can all enjoy this for real. Let me know what you think, and adios.